We have officially left the old timeline from the 80s and 90s. That's where I'm from. It was a good timeline too, by the way. And we've entered into a new timeline that is very robotic. I don't know if you'd call it transhumanist, but something's definitely happened. Not just with the timeline itself, not just with the world around us, but with the people. If you think about everything around us, it is all becoming very robotic. And now we have AI that's being ushered in. And AI is basically the definition of robotic. I just saw a couple weeks ago where they now have an AI assistant robot that can come into your house and it can do everything that a human does. You know, we're essentially looking at Terminator, I guess, being reborn here. There are a lot of movies out there that warned us about all this stuff, but here we are. We're living a robotic life. And I think with every single day that passes, this is getting profoundly worse. I don't see this going well. I just don't. I think that we're headed in a direction that it's very unnerving, actually. And it's kind of hard to imagine where we're headed. You know, talking about the robot I saw on TV, you know, something very interesting about that is that they were saying, oh yeah, this robot can do all the things that a human can do. But there might be one little safety concern, just one little minor concern. And that is that if the robot gets himself into a bind and he can't do what he's supposed to do, there's somebody on the other end of that transmission that can tap into your robot and can control him remotely from a cubicle somewhere. Who's to say what kind of background that person has? And this robot in particular, it can lift up to 150 pounds and carry 50 pounds, so it's pretty strong. So if there was a disgruntled employee on the other end of that transmission that wanted to do you harm, he could probably do that. Or if he wanted to steal your belongings and run the little robot out into the street and get into a car and take off with all your stuff, he could probably do that too. There's a lot of very terrible things that could happen with this robot that you're essentially letting into your house. Because when you think about this, you're not just letting the robot into your house, you're letting a person into your house. Anytime that robot gets into a bind, there's somebody in your home. And that, again, is just one small piece of this. I'm talking about how our world in general is becoming very robotic. I mean, think about this, okay? Think about how we live our lives. Our world, our reality, modern society has become very robotic. It is becoming very cold and very calculated. That's how robots act, right? That's the world that surrounds us. There's a pre-programmed script that every single one of us is supposed to follow, just like non-player characters, just like NPCs in a video game. That's exactly how the modern world is set up. From birth, we are programmed to get an education. We go to school so that we can get a job. And that job is us fulfilling a role that we are essentially supposedly born into to fill in society. We're supposed to follow the script. We're supposed to find our place in society, and we're supposed to never deviate outside of that. We just go to work every single day. We do what society tells us to do, and that's our life. We are essentially programmed with code from our parents, from society, from the government, from everywhere, to do what we do, to follow these specific parameters. And we can deviate outside of that to a certain extent. There are certain things that we can do. Free will does come into play. And we can kind of blaze our own trail when it comes to that. But for the most part, most people, they follow that script. Because if you deviate outside of that, then society takes notice. Then you're often demonized. You're often criticized. You're often looked down upon. And that keeps us in that role. It keeps us as the NPC, the non-player character. It keeps us following the script, following the programming. And if we deviate outside of that, then that means there must be a bug. It means there must be a virus. That's kind of how we're programmed. I mean, really, think about this. Think about what happens when people deviate from the script. There's a lot of people that usually think that that person has a problem. And that is a very common theme. And what do we do when there's a bug? What do we do when there's a virus? We wipe the programming and we start over. We build it back up from scratch, or we run an antivirus. We run an update and we update the code. We update the programming. And I really feel like that's where we're at in society, because people in general have changed in very drastic ways. You think about people in the modern world compared to like the 80s and 90s when I grew up. Back then, we were very, very outgoing. We socialized. We were cordial with one another. We showed quite a bit of respect to one another. We respected the opposite sex. We respected our peers. We held the door for people. We struck up conversations in public settings. We weren't always in a hurry to go nowhere. Everything was so much different. Everything was so much more peaceful and calm. But today, we're running this code. We're on this pre-programmed script, this very robotic way of doing things. We as people have become very cold and callous. We don't talk to one another like we used to. And if you do strike up a conversation with a stranger, it almost feels like immediately that there's some sort of ill intent. Like there's some reason you're doing this. There's an agenda behind it. That's what a lot of people feel like. And that keeps people from doing it. People like me that actually want to strike up a conversation with people, you don't want to, because when you do, it's not appreciated. And it's usually not reciprocated. And in a lot of cases, people just think you want something. And people in general, I think, have just grown very cold, not just because of that, but because of all the stuff that is being pumped into our lives, all of the insane ideologies and these agendas, and just the way people are, and all of this division that is being sown between all the people, it has caused people to regress. People have retreated from society, and people have gotten very cold because people just want to be left alone. People just want their peace. They want to be left in silence. They want to find solitude, and they don't want to deal with all this craziness that's going on in the world around us. And I think the last 5 to 10 years specifically has changed people in drastic ways, because people have come to a lot of realizations. And I think in a lot of ways, people have woken up. They've woken up to the fact that we've been fed a bill of lies a mile long. They've woken up to the fact that all of the interests that govern us don't necessarily have our best interests in mind. They've also woken up to the fact that you simply can't trust a lot these days. And I think a lot of people are seeing this. A lot of people are aware of what's happening. They're aware that we are becoming very robotic. They're aware that we're becoming very cold, that we're running on this pre-programmed script that a lot of people simply don't want to run on. I know there's a lot of people that want to escape the 9 to 5. They want to escape the rules that modern society tells us we need to adhere to. They want to get away from all that. But a lot of people don't want to wake up because, again, when you wake up, when you're one of the people that's an outlier, that means that you must have a bug. You must have a virus. There must be something wrong with you. And there's a pretty good chance that society is going to demonize you because of that. There's a pretty good chance that you're going to be ostracized because of that. And when you wake up, that means that you step outside of that NPC role and you now have to become the main character. You have to become the hero in the video game instead of being this character that just runs around and does what it's told. It runs on the programming. You're no longer in that programming, so now you have to blaze your own trail. You have to forge your own path, and you have to do things your way. And for somebody who's been following the script and following the programming their entire life, that can be kind of a scary thing. And I think that really keeps a lot of people from actually going after the things in life they want, from deviating from this robotic world that we're all now trapped in. I think it keeps people in the NPC role. It keeps them from being a hero in their own lives. And that's a terrible thing, because when we're born into this world, we are our hero in our own lives. We have the opportunity to shape our reality into whatever we want to make it. But if we get too caught up into this programming, and we follow the script, and we get wrapped up in this robotic world that we're all trapped in, the longer you're in it, the harder it is to escape. And the harder it is to break yourself free from those old habits that we've all formed. And I think that's another thing that keeps a lot of people trapped, is simply that when you're so used to doing things a certain way, it can be pretty hard to break yourself out of that. And it can be kind of scary. It can also be kind of scary to know that you're an outlier, and that there's a pretty good chance that society is going to look down on you because of the things that you're doing, because you're living a life that is true to you. And to a lot of people, that looks very unorthodox. It goes against the grain, and a lot of people don't agree with it. And the reason a lot of people don't agree with it is not just because you're an outlier and you're an outcast, but it's also because they also want to do the same thing. They wish they could put themselves in your shoes and walk a mile in them. They wish that they could be the one breaking free from the programming, living life on their terms. But many people are too scared. So therefore, they have to take that out on you. They have to take it out on the people that wake up and free themselves from this robotic world. And that's not your fault. That's an issue with them. That's an issue of character, because they simply don't have the willpower to do what you did. And in this world, in this robotic world that we're all living in, I think being an outlier, being an outcast, and being stigmatized and looked down upon and ostracized is actually a blessing. Because if you are the outlier in a robotic world that's kind of cold, kind of callous, and is kind of following the programming, and that is made up vastly of NPCs that are just following the script and doing what they're told, then that means you're the hero of your own life. You're living life on your terms. You're doing things that are no longer robotic, and you're living in a very natural and organic way. I would say that you're even living in a way that we're meant to live, because I don't think we're meant to follow this pre-programmed script. I don't think we're meant to live in a world that is robotic. I think we're meant to go out and just do things. We're meant to live in a way that is very spontaneous. And I think that's probably the best way to describe it, because if you think about all of our history, we were probably living in a very spontaneous way. We didn't follow a pre-programmed script. Every single day was different. And that's still true today, but because we're trapped into this programming in this robotic world, we do follow a script. Every day is not really different because we're doing the same stuff. We're waking up and we're going to work, and then we're coming home and we have a couple hours to ourselves that maybe we can do something organic. Maybe we can strike up a conversation with a stranger. Maybe we can do something that is not necessarily pre-programmed. But then we have to go to bed and we have to wake up the next day and do the same thing all over again. And we're largely doing all this for money. Money is the key to all this. It's the reason we're following this programming. It's the reason the world has become very robotic, because when you think about all the bad things that have happened throughout history, almost all of them have been money and greed driven. And when they say money is the root of all evil, it kind of looks like that is the case. Yes, money will buy you some of the things in life that you want, but what it's really buying you is your time. You're buying back your time when you're working. And that is how you gain your freedom. You gain freedom from having more money. Money actually buys you freedom. That is what we're all striving to get. We're not striving to get all this stuff that we think is going to make us happy. We think that we need the big house and the nice car and all this fancy stuff, but what we're actually searching for is an answer, and we're actually searching for something that's going to fill the void in our heart and in our soul, and that void is there, and we're all actively searching for something because we're living a life that is not natural to us. And again, this robotic life is caused because of money, because we're following this pre-programmed script, which all ties back to money. So you can see that this is a very vicious cycle. It's a perpetual cycle that we're all stuck in. And when you think about a robot, that's kind of a perpetual cycle, because they do what they're told. Their day is the same every single day. They run on the programming. They cannot deviate too far outside of that, because when they do, there's a problem. And when you really drill this down, you really think about our lives, that is exactly the way we live it. But I think it's high time that we don't. I think it's high time that we deviate from the programming and we escape this robotic world that we're all trapped in, because now the AI is coming in and it's taking over. Things are going to get profoundly more robotic. And I believe that they are with every single day that passes. We spend more time, more days of our lives with our face stuck in our screens, in our phones. We use AI, we rely on it now. We use technology and we rely on it. We use it for everything. And I think it's only a matter of a few very short years before we stop using technology and technology starts using us. I think that's exactly where we're headed, especially if we allow ourselves to continue to become this reliant on technology and AI and all of these things that are causing us really to regress as a species. And an argument can be made that yes, we're becoming more advanced technologically, which may mean that we might become more advanced as a species, but we're regressing in all the aspects that matter. We're regressing in all the human aspects, all the things that set us apart from all the other species on this planet. Communication, empathy, love, passion, a heightened sense of consciousness, the ability to feel and experience a vast array of different emotions, the ability to share knowledge and stories and life experiences. These are all the things that throughout all of history, humans have been very good at doing. But now with all this technology coming in and taking over our lives, we're losing that. And what happens when we lose the fundamental aspects that make us human? I would say that at that point, we become the robots. We stop living in a robotic world and we become the robotic world. We form the robotic world around us, and that's where we exist. That's where we stay. And if we do that, that means that we stay in that programming. That means we can never deviate outside of it. And that means that we're just non-player characters. We're floating through life with no sense of direction, no sense of purpose, and that probably means that we're not fulfilled. Because if we're just floating through life following the programming, then what's the point? Because at that point, you're living a life that is not true to you. You're living a life that was chosen for you. And how many of us want to do that? I can tell you that I don't. I don't want to live a pre-programmed life. I don't want to follow the script and follow the norm and do everything everyone else does. I want to live a life that's true to me. And the way things are going, a life that's true to me is vastly different from the modern life. And that doesn't necessarily mean that I don't want to work and I don't want to do all the things that most people in life do today. But what it does mean is that I want to work on my terms. I want to do things in life that I enjoy. I want to go after my dreams. I want to pursue my passions. My goal is to ultimately become the main character in my own life, become the hero of my own journey, to forge my own path, to blaze my own trail, and to live life on my terms. That is my goal. And I believe that by simply having an uncommon goal that allows you to step outside of this robotic programming, that is the first step to becoming the main character and the hero of your own life.